Today's daf yomi is Gittin Memtes, Gittin 49. Today's daf yomi is we're in the middle of things, and going back, we have to go back to the Mishnah on 48 on Memches. We started the chapter called Nizakin. This chapter has nothing to do with Gittin. It's just continuing the theme of Tikkun Olam, of repairs of the world. So the Gemara tells us that the Mishnah had said that if a person gets his property damaged, he collects from the best of the property from the edis. There are different types of property. There's Class A property that's called edis, Class B property that's called beinonis, and Class C property that's called ziboris. So if a person's property is damaged, the person collects from the edis of the mazik, and he collects from the best property of the one who damaged him, and that the Mishnah says that's because of what's called tikkun olam, to improve the world. So the Gemara asks the question, why is that tikkun olam? Why is that considered to be like a reform that the rabbis made to improve the world? It's an explicit verse. It's not a reform of the rabbis. It's an explicit verse. And the verse is from Exodus, from Parshas Mishpatim. It says, if a person will damage your field, meitav sadeu, meitav karmo, you shall aim. From the best of his field and the best of his vineyard, he shall pay. So why does our Mishnah call it tikkun olam? Why does our Mishnah say that he collects from the best property of the damager because of tikkun olam? So the first answer that the Gemara gives to this question is from Abaye. And Abaye says that our Mishnah is consistent with the position of Rabbi Yishmael, because that Rabbi Yishmael is of the position that, biblically speaking, you collect from the best of the property of the nizak, of the person who's damaged, that he gets to take only equivalent to the best of his property, meaning to say if the damager has three classes of property, and his class C equals the best of the class A of the one who was damaged, then the damaged party, the nizak, only collects from the class C. But rabbinically speaking, the rabbis made a takana, tikkun olam, that he gets to even collect from the class A of that property. But biblically speaking, our Mishnah goes, according to the approach of biblically speaking, he gets to collect from the best of that property. So that's the that he gets to collect from the worst of that property, but biblically speaking, he collects from the best of the property of himself. Rabbinically, tikkun olam, he gets to collect it from the class C property of the damager. So whereas Rabbi Akiva said in Rabbi Akiva's statement in that brisa, says Abaye, he says no, we collect it from the mazik, from the best of the property of the one who does a damage biblically, because that's what the verse says. Mitav sadeu, mitav karmo yishalem, and kal v'chomer, and for sure for hektish. And we're going to have to understand what that means. Hektish is the sacred property. So now we'll start today's daf on the top of 49a, 2 lines from the top. So the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to review what I just said. Or I said what the Gemara just said. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel savar b'din nizak shamina. Rabbi Shmuel says that biblically speaking, when you take from the best of the property of the nizak, the one who was damaged, Rabbi Akiva savar b'din mazik shamina. Rabbi Akiva says, biblically speaking, you get to take from the mazik, not from the nizak, but from the best of the property of the mazik. My time with the Rabbi Shmuel. What's the reason for Rabbi Shmuel that b'din nizak shamina? Nemra, because it says sadeh lamata v'nemra sadeh lamahor. It says in the verse ki yaver ish sadeh okerem. Then meitav sadeh meitav karmo yishalem. So it says the word field twice. When a person burns somebody else's field, then he collects from the best of the field. So Rabbi Shmuel says, Nemar sadeh lamata v'nemra sadeh lamala ma sadeh amur lamala denizak. Just like whose field is being burnt, the nizak, the damaged party. Av sadeh amur lamata. So therefore, when you come to collect it, then you're collecting from the nizak. You're collecting from the best of the property of the nizak. That's what you collect from. Whereas Rabbi Kiva says, no, meitav sadeh yishalem. He pays from the best of the fields. The hayach tekam shalem. The one who pays from the best of the field. So that's what he says. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shmuel, Ahani Gzeira Shava Ahani Kra. Rabbi Shmuel says we have the Gzeira Shava. The Gzeira Shava is we take two words that are the same and we compare them. And Ahani Kra, and we also have two verses that are that the verse itself, it's meaning that you pay from the best of his property. It is also needed here. Ahani Gzeira Shava. Rabbi Shmuel says the fact that the words are the same tell us that we take from the Meitav of the Nizak. We take from the best property of the damaged party. Ahani Kra, and what does it mean? What is the verse telling us? The Islay Lemazik Idis Visibaris. Now let's say the mazik, let's say the one who is damaged has the one who is damaged has Edis and Ziboris. The one who is damaged has the Islay Lamazik, the one who does the damage, has Edis, he has class A property, and Ziboris and class C property. However, Ziboris today will shavya ki Edis Teniza. His class C is not the equivalent of the class A of the one who is damaged. Then the Mishalim Levi Meitav. Then if his class A is not the equivalent, if his class C, if the damager's class C does not equal the class A of the Nizak, well then he does have to pay him. Then the damager does have to pay him from his own class A, and that's what we learned from the verse. The Mishalim Levi Meitav. So now the Gemara says, okay, let's analyze what Rabbi Akiva said. Rabbi Akiva said, biblically speaking, the damager pays from the best of his property, and so Rabbi Akiva Omer, he says that the verse is telling us that if a damager does damage, he collects from the best of its property. And for sure for consecrated property. Meaning hektish is something that somebody consecrated to the temple. So what does this mean? Kal v'chomer. Kal v'chomer is the logical argument. What does it mean? Kal v'chomer hektish. What does that statement of Rabbi Akiva mean? Gemara says we have to just analyze the statement. If you want to say it means dinag chay sar didan was sar the hektish. So let's say it's referring to a case where the damager's ox gored the ox that had belonged to the temple, and it's telling us that he now has to pay the temple from the best of his property. It can't be that that's what it means. Why? Because the Torah tells us, we have a teaching elsewhere that because it says in the Torah that if your ox scores your friend's ox, you have to pay. There's a teaching in the Talmud that you do not pay at all if you gore the temple's property, because the verse tells us you only pay if you gore your friend's ox, not if you gore the temple's ox. So it can't be that that's what it means. Omer, so maybe it's referring to the following case. Somebody says, if a person says, I'm going to give $100 to the temple, the Asi Gizbar, now the treasurer of the temple is coming to collect your debt. The Asi Gizbar v'shakal meidus. Maybe Rabbi Akiva is saying that the treasurer comes and collects it from Class A property of the one who made that pledge. Well, no, that wouldn't work either, because somebody who makes a pledge, he owes the temple money. Well, Ella Balchov, then all he becomes is a creditor. Balchov Dino Bebenonis. And we learned in our Mishnah that a creditor pays from Class B property. And if you want to say Rabbi Akiva Balchov Shakal Beidis, if you want to say that Rabbi Akiva is of the position that the creditor collects from the Class A property, Kinizakin, like somebody who did damage, we could break that Kal v'chomer. Equal mirfrach, we could break that Kal v'chomer because we could say Mala Balchov, a creditor is different. Shekain Yafek Kocho Benizakin. A creditor is different because he has Shekain Yafek Kocho Benizakin. A creditor is different because if a creditor if his ox damages somebody else's ox, then he's going to be liable for damages. But it's not the same by hektish. You can't compare that to hektish. You can't learn a kal v'chomer to hektish. Shekain hora kochel b'nezikin, because tomar b'hektish, where if you gore the ox of the temple, you don't pay any damages. So you can't learn a case for the temple. You can't learn a kal v'chomer to hektish, because hektish is weaker with respect to damaging of an ox. So therefore, the Gemara says, okay, so this is what Rabbi Akiva must have meant. Well, Olam, Rabbi Akiva must have meant the Nakhay Sora Didan was Sora Daktish. We must be talking about a case where our ox gores the ox of the temple. We must be talking about a case where our ox gores the ox of the temple. And so therefore, Rabbi Akiva, and so why do we say you for sure pay from the best of the damages? Didn't we just say you don't pay at all if your ox scores the temple's ox? But actually, Rabbi Akiva holds you do pay. Rabbi Akiva savarlak Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. Rabbi Akiva says if your ox scores the temple's ox, you do have to pay. And he follows the position of Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe. The Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe said that if it's the shor shel hektish, if it's the ox of the temple, shenagach shor shel hektish, if the temple's ox scores your ox, then the temple is exempt. Potter. The temple, if the temple's ox scores your ox, temple doesn't need to pay. But if your ox scores the temple's ox, then bein town bein muad misham nezek sham. So if the temple gores you, the temple doesn't have to pay. But if you gore the temple, you have to pay. That's what Rabbi Akiva was saying, that if you damage somebody else's property, you pay from the best, and for sure, if you damage the temple's property, you're going to pay from the best. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if that's what we say that the argument is between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael is about, if that's what Rabbi Akiva is saying, that if your ox scores a temple, you for sure pay from the best of the property. If that's the case, then why do we want to assume, like Abaye said, that the dispute between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva is in a case where the person who was damaged, his Class A property is equivalent to the Class C property of the one who did the damage. That Rabbi Shmuel says you pay from the Class C property of the damager, and Rabbi Akiva says you pay from the Class A property of the damager. But why do we want to assume that that's a dispute? Dilma, the Kula Alma, maybe everybody says the Denizak Shamina. Maybe even Rabbi Shmuel would agree that under those circumstances you could pay from the Class C property of the damager. The Hacha, and here, what's the dispute in this price between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva? Maybe it's just a dispute between Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe and the Rabbanan. Akiva Savarla. Maybe Rabbi Akiva holds like Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe that if you damage the ox of the temple, you pay full damages from the best. Rabbi Shmuel Savarla Rabbanan, and Rabbi Shmuel holds like the Rabbanan, who says that you wouldn't pay anything there. And maybe that's the dispute. Gemara says, no, that's not what they're arguing about here for three reasons. First reason is, in Cain, my lo ba'al kosev. Rabbi Akiva uses the formulation that the verse is not coming to teach us about Meitav Sadeh, Meitav Karmon, is not coming to teach us about that Rabbi Yishmael is saying, that Rabbi Akiva is saying that the verse isn't coming to teach us about if you use the best of the nizak, but it's coming to teach us about you take the best of the damager. And if you're learning out from hektish, there's nothing to do with the verse. And second of all, va'od my kal v'chomer lehektish. Now this phrase is not as simple to understand, but Rabbi Akiva uses this phrase in kal v'chomer for hektish. But if you're saying that the whole thing is about hektish, you can't say kal v'chomer for hektish. Rashi understands this line differently. Rashi says that it is a kula. It's a whole of a kulahi. So, meaning to say that the whole idea that the damager only pays from his Class C property is a leniency. So how can we say in Kavachomer for hektish that because we're not being lenient by hektish? By hektish, we're paying from the best of the property. How can you say that for sure we should be lenient also by hektish? That doesn't make sense with the expression of kula. That's what Rashi says. And the third approach is Vahod Amaravashi. We have an explicit brisa. An explicit brisa that supports that this is the dispute between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva. On the top of 49b, what's the explicit brisa? Tanya Madu, we learn in the brisa, it says, Meitav Sadeo, Meitav Karmo Yishalem, that you pay from the best of your property if you do damage. Meitav Sadeo Shal Nizak, Meitav Karmo Shal Nizak. Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel says it means that you pay the equivalent of the best of the property of the one who is damaged. That is what he says, that you pay the equivalent of the best of the property of the one who was damaged. Whereas Rabbi Akiva says, Meitav Sadeh Shal Mazik, Meitav Karmo Shal Nazik. Rabbi Akiva says, no, you pay the best of the property of the damager. And so we have an explicit source that that's what they're arguing about. So all of this was the approach of Abaye to our Mishnah. Just to review, that our Mishnah says that on account of Tikkun Olam, that if the person is damaged, he collects from the best of the property. And the Gemara says, well, isn't it a biblical law? And why are you saying it's Tikkun Olam? And Abaye says, no, biblically, Rabbi Yishmael says you collect from the best of the property of the damaged, but rabbinically, because of Tikkun Olam, we collect from the best of the property of the damager. Ravina is going to give a different answer. Ravina says, Ravina says, actually, our Mishnah follows the position of Rabbi Akiva, who says, the Amar Midiaraisa b'da Mazik Shemina. And he says, actually, our opinion follows the position of Rabbi Akiva, who says, biblically speaking, b'da Mazik Shemina. And he says, biblically speaking, we analyze it not from the Nizak, that biblically speaking, he says, I'm not saying Rabbi Yishmael is saying this. He's saying, biblically speaking, you have to pay from the damager. The damager's best property. So why does our Mishnah call this Tikkun Olam? Tikkun Olam applies, it's a rabbinic reform. It's a biblical law. So he says, no, there's a concept here. Ma tam kamer, that the Mishnah is saying, what's the reason for the verse? There's a concept throughout the Talmud. Do we try to understand the reason behind the biblical commandments? And our Mishnah is saying, yeah, we're going to explain the reason behind the biblical commandments. The Torah tells us that if you do damage to somebody else's ox, that the damager has to pay from the best of the property. And the reason for that is because of Tikkun Olam, because otherwise the world is not going to function properly. This is the best way to get the world to function, to say to somebody that if you damage somebody else's property, you're going to have to pay from your Class A property. And this is the position of Rabbi Shimon, who is Doresh Taima Dekra. Rabbi Shimon always explains the reason behind the verses. So that's what Ravina is saying, that our Mishnah is reflecting biblical law as it is explained, and the Tikkun Olam is the explanation of this biblical law. But Rabbi Shimon, he did Doresh Taima Dekra, Matam Kamer. He's explaining the reason for the law. Matam Anizakin Shamal Beidis. What's the reason why somebody who's damaged? Do we look at the best of his property? What's the reason that we evaluate the best of the property of the damager so that the world functions better? And we have a source for this. The Tanya Amar Rabbi Shimon what's the reason why we say somebody who's damaged, that we collect from the best of the property of the damager? Because of the Gazlanim are robbers and Chamsanim are like bandits. Then what do they do? That Kadesha Yomer Adam, like a person should say, Lamani Gozo, Lamani Chomes. Why should a person should say, I'm not going to get anything out of stealing, I'm not going to get anything out of taking something forcibly from somebody else. But Machar Bezdin Yardel Nachas. If I do this, the court's going to go into my property tomorrow. Notlin Sudden Noashli, they're going to take my best field. And they're going to be relying upon that which it says in the Torah. They're going to take the verse. It says, take from the best of its property. Therefore, the Torah tells us that if somebody's damaged, he gets to go into the best property of the damager to take it, disincentivizing stealing and damaging somebody else. And once we were talking about this, our Mishnah said that a creditor, he has to pay from his Class B property. Why does a creditor get to collect from the Class B property? What's the reason for that? Because we don't want the creditor to be able to collect from the Class A property, because that'll lead to predatory loaning. Because we don't want a person to see the field of his friend. He says, oh, my friend has a nice geschmack field, then I'm going to want to take this field and grow watermelons in it. So I'll lend him a lot of money, and I know he won't be able to pay it back. I know he doesn't make the income necessary to pay back my loan, and then I'll seize the property. And Vidira and he's got a beautiful home. The Omer Ekboats, I'll lend him the money. And this way I'll be able to borrow it with the debt he owes me. Therefore, the rabbis thought a creditor only gets to collect from the Class B property. Well, if that's the case, if we're worried about predatory loaning, tell him to collect from the Class C. No, that far we don't want to go. That's going to shut the door before the borrowers. Nobody's going to lend money at all if they can only collect from Class C property. And then we said Ksuvas Isha. Ksuva is the bond the woman gets at the outset of marriage, that at the conclusion of the marriage, she gets to collect the money from either her husband or his estate. So Ksuvas Isha, busy Boris. The woman collects this from the Class C property. That's the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Whereas Rabbi Meir says Bebenonis, that a woman collects the Ksuva from the Class B property. So Amar Rabbi Shimon Mamru Ksuvas Isha busy Boris. Rabbi Shimon says, why does a woman collect the Ksuba only from Class C? And the reason is because we know that the woman is really desperate to get married, so therefore we can just say that we don't have to incentivize her getting married, so she'll only be able to collect from the Class C property because the rabbi said more than a man wants to get married, the woman wants to get married, and so since she really is desperate to get married, we don't have to give her any incentive by giving her Class B or Class A property. Then the Talmud says, Davar Acher, alternative approach, Isha Yotzel, so now a woman can leave the marriage whether willingly or against her will. But the man leaves the marriage only if he agrees to leave it. And the Gemara says, well, this statement doesn't make any sense. What is the Gemara saying here? What's the Brisa telling us? Reads it as follows. If you want to say, if you want to say, well, just like if he divorces her, then the rabbis say that she gets to collect a ksuva from him. When she forces the marriage to terminate, how does she force the marriage to terminate? Let's say she goes to the court and says, this man is disgusting, he repulses me, please end the marriage. Let the rabbi say that she has to give him a ksuva, give him money. So we say we don't say that because Tashma Isha Yotzal Ertzona Mashalo Ertzona. The woman, when she gets divorced, it could be willingly or against her will. She could even get divorced. This is in the time of the Talmud. Later on, the rabbi said that the woman has to agree to get divorced. But in the time of the Talmud, the woman can be divorced even willingly. But the man, Eino Motzi El Ertzona. The man only can end the marriage if he agrees. And so therefore, even if she wants to delay, if she wants to kick him out, after the Mashu Abakita, he could delay the termination of the marriage by withholding the get. And so therefore, for this reason, we don't say that the man gets a ksuva at the termination of the marriage. So now we said that the ksuvas isha v'ziburis, the woman gets to collect the ksuva from the Class C property. So Amar Marzutra, the son of Rav Nachman taught, well, Amran, when do we say the woman gets to collect from the Class C property? That's only miyasme. That's only from the orphans, meaning to say if the husband dies and she goes to the estate to collect the property, she only collects that from the Class C property. Avomine dide, but let's say she's collecting it from the husband himself because he's still alive, i.e. a situation of a divorce, then under those circumstances, the Beinonis, then she's going to be able to collect even from the Class B property. Meaning if she's collecting it from the estate, from the orphans, then she collects from the worst property. But if she's collecting it from the husband himself, then she collects to collect from the B property. That's Meretz Utra. So the Gemara says, well, I don't understand this. Miyasme, if she's really collecting it from the orphans, from the estate, then my Yirya Ksuvas Isha, why are we singling out a Ksuva of a woman? I feel called Milinami. Anybody, we have a principle in our Mishnah that anybody who collects from the estate, from the orphans, only collects from the Class C property. Da Tanan, because didn't we learn in the Mishnah? And she could only collect from the estate, from the lowest property, from the Class C. So it must mean when it says the Ksuvas Isha is from the Ziboris, that the Ksuva is collected from the Class C, it must mean Elav Mineh, it must mean even from him. So it's a question against Marzutra. So the Gemara says, no. No, Marzutra says when our Mishnah says that she collects from the estate, that she collects the Ksuva from Class C, that means it's from the orphans. Ksuvas Isha at Strichole. And we needed it specifically to tell us in our Mishnah that a ksuva of a woman is collected from Class C property, even from the orphans. Because you might have thought, and this is the opposite logic of what we said before, And we might have thought that the woman doesn't want to get married, and we have to bribe her into getting married in general. Mishum china ikilu rabbanan gaba. We might have thought the rabbis really wanted to incentivize the woman to get married, and thereby promise her that she could collect from the Class B property, even from an estate. So we say no, that she can only collect it from the ziburis. Kamash Milan, we say she could only collect it from the Class C. So now Rava's again going to challenge Mar Zutra. Again, what does Mar Zutra say? Mar Zutra says that when our Mishnah says that the woman collects her ksuba from the Class C property, that's only if she's collecting from the estate. But if she's collecting from the husband himself, she collects it from Class B. So Rava says, let's challenge this. Tashma, didn't we learn in the Brisa? Rav Meir says ksuvas isha bebeinonis. That Rav Meir says that the ksuba of a woman is collected from the Class B property. Now, miman, from whom does she collect it? If you want to say from the orphan, she collects it from Class B. Why would you say that? Why would you say that? Didn't we have explicitly in our Mishnah that from the orphan she collects from Class C? It must be that even from the husband, it's from the husband, and that's where she collects Class B. But Mar Zutra was saying his position not according to Rabbi Meir. Mar Zutra was saying it according to the Rabbanan. From the fact that Rabbi Meir says that she collects it from the husband from Class B, Miklal, the Rabbanan Savri Biziboris Lo. It must be that the Rabbanan disagree with him and Rabbi Meir, and they say that even when she's collecting it from the husband, she collects it from Class C. The Gemara says, no, we're not going to draw that assumption. No, really, when Rabbi Meir says she collects it from Class B, it's even from the orphans. And Rabbi Meir says the opposite. Rabbi Meir says, Shani ksuvas isha mishum china. Rabbi Meir says, no, we have to bribe the woman. We have to incentivize her to get married. And so therefore, we allow her to get the ksuba, even from the orphans, from the Class B property. Amar Abaye. So Abaye, again, wants to challenge Mar Zutra. Mar Zutra's position is that according to the Rabbanan, the woman collects the ksuba from her husband from the Class B property. So Tashma, let's bring a proof against Mar Zutra from our Mishnah. Because what do we learn in our Mishnah? It says, "Hanizakin shamalam be'idis," that the damages you collect from the best property. Ba'achov be'beinonis, the creditor you collect from the Class B. Ksuvas isha beziboris, the ksuba of a woman you collect from the Class C property. Miman, who are you collecting all this ksuba from? Who are you collecting all these things from? So that's what the Gemara asks. Miman, who is it from? If you want to say that our Mishnah is talking about where you're collecting the damages from the orphans and the creditor from the orphans and the ksuba from the orphans, well, why would you say specifically the ksuvas isha? Why then would you say the ksuba specifically is collected from the Class C property? We have a principle that everything that's collected from orphans is collected from Class C. Afilu kohani nami. Everything is collected from Class C when you're collecting from orphans. So it must be afilu kohani nami. Everything is collected. Elav mine. It must be that we're talking about a circumstance. Our Mishnah is talking about where he's collecting it from the person himself. And so therefore, since even though he's collecting it from the person himself, he's collecting it from the ksuba from Class C, and that's a direct refutation of Mar Zutra. So that's what Abaye says. That's a refutation of Mar Zutra. So Amar Rav Achav bar Yaakov, no, says Rav Achav bar Yaakov, no, Achamay Askinon. Here, what we're talking about in our Mishnah is that our Mishnah is not talking about where you're collecting from the orphans or the person themselves. What is our Mishnah referring to? We're talking about where our Mishnah is referring to a case where you're going to collect it from the guarantor, a person who said, I'm going to be a guarantor for anything any damage my son does. I'm the guarantor for my son's damages. I'm the guarantor for my son's debts. And I'm the guarantor for my son's ksuba. So a person who says, a person says, I'm going to be the guarantor for my son's damages. And so therefore, the law is that just like his son would have to pay from the best, he has to pay from the best. Or if he's going to be the guarantor for his son's debt, the son would pay from class B, so he pays from class B. Or if he says, I'm going to be the guarantor for my son's ksuba, now after his son dies, he has to pay from the class C. And mizakin ubalchov, and so the damages and the creditor, those are typically collected while the person is alive. The michayim gavu, they're typically collected while the person you're guaranteeing for is still alive. So therefore, iunami, so the guarantor, when he has to pay, kimagbi kimachayim magbi, he's paying as though the person were alive, and so therefore for damages from the best, and for creditor from the middle property. Ksuva sisha, but the ksuva is typically collected to l'achar misa gavi. In most cases of a ksuba, were collected after death. L'achar misa miman gavi, and after death, who do you collect it from? Miasmi, you collect it from the estate. So therefore, iunami ki magvi ko achar misa magvi. So therefore, he also, when he's collecting it as though it's after the death, and so therefore it's collected from class C, and so therefore that's the reason, and it's not a refutation against Mar Zutra. So the Gemara says, well, we have a problem with this answer that Rav Acha bar Yaakov gave. Is it really possible to say that our Mishnah is talking about a guarantor? Typically, even if you want to say that this law of Mar Zutra, you can't do that because we have halacha, the Arev Ksuva lo mishtabed. We have a separate law that if a person who's a guarantor for the payment of a ksuba, he doesn't have to pay. You can't collect from the husband at all. So if the father really did guarantee his son's ksuba, he's judgment proof. And we'll see why in a few moments. But it can't be that our Mishnah is referring to a case where the woman is collecting the ksuba from the father of her husband, because then she wouldn't collect anything from him. Gemara says, yeah, that will be if it would be a typical guarantor. A typical guarantor, you can't collect from the estate at all for a ksuba. But this is an atypical guarantor. This is called an Arev Kablan. An Arev Kablan, word Kablan means to accept. He accepted, is a guarantor, accepts upon himself, come to me even before you go to the person who actually has the debt. Come to me first. Well, if he makes that type of arrangement, then you could collect even in the situation of a ksuva. And so that's what's called an Arev Kablan. That's what this is referring to. Rashi says, Shanasel al Kablan. He became a Kablan, this type of guarantor, Hitfisa beno metaltal ksuvasa, that his son gave metaltalin, gave movable objects for a ksuva, and she gave it over to the father, betoras kapwanos, v'chzirason lebino. So what's going on here? So the Gemara says, well, that's still not proof, because this only works according to the one who says, Kavon, Avapi the Wasley Nixelova, Mishtabe, that a guarantor, an Arv Kablan, even when the borrower has no assets when he takes the loan, then he's still responsible. Shapir, Alamanda Amr, but according to the one who says the Islay, if the borrower actually has assets when he takes the loan, Mishtabe, then the guarantor is responsible because he's relying upon those assets. And so therefore the guarantor will pay. But if the borrower has no assets when he takes the loan, he's not going to be responsible because he doesn't think that he's ever going to have to pay it. And so if that's the case here, since his son has no assets, how do we understand this case? So let me read the Rashi. This is a dispute in the Gemara in Baba Basra in the chapter that's called Get Pashut. Let's say the borrower has assets, B'shas Alfa, at the time of the loan, the Iko Lamemer that you could say, Samach Ha'ar Bazeh, the Gamar V'Shiba Nafshi, that the guarantor really enters into this relationship thinking that the borrower is really going to pay. Mishtabed. Then he's responsible. And then if the guy's assets, the borrower's assets got ruined, okay, he'll have to pay. But in this case, where the son has no assets, for sure the son has no assets to pay. Because if he has assets, then you wouldn't take the payment from the guarantor. Because we have a principle that if the if you borrow money from the guarantor, from through a guarantor, then the guarantor, you cannot go to collect directly from the guarantor. So if that's the case, you had a question, Joe? So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, how would we say, why would we assume that the father really is guaranteeing the loan for real for his son here, the ksuba, when he must have not have had any assets to begin with? So why do we assume he's guaranteeing it? So the Gemara explains, okay, maybe the case is no, the son had assets and they got ruined, or it's a special relationship for a father and a son. Even though the son has no assets, the father is guaranteeing it.
Lender want a higher level guarantee if the borrower did not have assets. But there's just the opposite of that.
Yeah, but we're saying that the guarantor wouldn't guarantee it for real if he didn't trust the assets of the borrower, of the person who he's guaranteeing. He has to see real assets there, otherwise he's not really guaranteeing it.
But he makes a guarantee.
No, so he has to be a different type of guarantee. But generally speaking, we wouldn't say he's a guarantee. That's what it's saying.
Yeah, but economic logic runs in the other direction. Right? The creditor is more likely to want a guarantor. If I'm lending you money and you have land and I have a lien on your land,
yeah,
I'm pretty secure. And yes, act of God come along and destroy it. But that's less likely to happen. On the other hand, if I lend you money and you have no assets, and I say, wouldn't guarantee it, you say, yeah, he's a good guy, then I'll say, okay, I'll give you the money, because even though you have no assets, you're back in the money.
So Gemara is going to discuss why this case is, why specifically by the ksuba we don't accept as a guarantor. But we want to really, I think what the Gemara is trying to do is the Gemara is trying to go to the intent of the guarantor to see if he was really guaranteeing it for real. And so therefore by a father and a son, we could say he was guaranteeing it for real. But in general, he wasn't real in his guarantee pledge. That's what the Gemara is going to say. So and the Gemara is going to analyze it like right now. Inmar, I know we're going a little bit long, but we'll just finish it up because Inmar, Arev Diksuva, if a person is a guarantee for a ksuva, Divrei Kol Mishtabi. We don't believe him. We don't believe him. You can't make the claim for the ksuba from him. And the reason is because he really never intended to pay for the ksuba. His whole intent was just to help them get married. His whole intent was to just to help them get married. He says, "Listen, I'm not hurting her. I want her to get married. I actually do him, and also." Secondly, the woman never really lost anything, so he has to give her something. So he really didn't intend to be the guarantor. And secondly, a kablan debalchov, a person who was an arev kablan, which is an arev kablan means that you can go to me before you even go to the person who owes the money. Divrei kol mishtabed. Everybody says that the guarantee for a creditor, everybody says that he really is all in. And the reason is because he intends to pay it. And he doesn't think the borrower is going to pay at all. That's why he says, come to me first. But if a person is just a regular guarantor for a debt, he says, if you lend him and he doesn't pay, I'll pay it. Or kablan de ksuva, or if he's arev kablan for a ksuva, meaning to a higher level of guarantee for ksuva, that's a dispute. There are some who say, even though the borrower doesn't have assets, he really intended to be the guarantor. And others say no. Others say that if he didn't have any assets, he really wasn't intending to agree. And that is the Gemara rule. So in the end, we concluded, like Jeff was saying, even if once you agree to be the guarantor, even though the guy doesn't have assets, you're going to be responsible, except except if you guarantee for a ksuba. We don't think the guy is real. If he guarantees a ksuba, we don't believe it. And even though the husband has assets at the time, we assume that he really didn't intend to be the guarantor. My time of mitzvah David, Because he says, I'm just doing a mitzvah. She doesn't lose anything. I'm guaranteeing it. She didn't pay any money. And so therefore, we don't believe a person when there's a mitzvah at stake. We don't think that he really was all in to be the guarantor, So the Gemara says, just finish this line till the two dots so that we can finish this line up until the two dots. The Gemara says, Amravina tashma mi kara ditakintin. At first, we're going to bring a proof against Marazutra because Marazutra said that you could collect, if you collect from the husband, you collect from the Beinonis. So at the outside of the Takana, the Chamim said you collect the ksuba from the Ziboris because because we thought a woman wants to get married desperately, so therefore she only gets collect from the class C. But if you're going to say like Marazutra that she's collecting, it's only from the orphans. It has nothing to do with that logic. So therefore, we see from here, tiyuvta de Marazutra tiyuvta. So it's a refutation of Marazutra, and so you always collect from class C because we say the woman really has a very strong incentive to get married, and so therefore she's going to be lenient in how she gets married. All right, we'll stop here. We'll pick up the sugya tonight again, right from this place. Beautiful sugya in the Gemara. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.